Driving school teachers. What are the most outrageous things student drivers have done while with you? I had an instructor who was famous for never using his teacher's brake, even when he should. I was riding in the back seat when another student was merging onto the freeway for the first time. The kid is looking over his shoulder and concentrating. He's determined to make the merge and never looked forward as he accelerated down the ramp. We drifted off the side and hit the snowbank at 50 miles per hour. Snow was roaring over the hood, and we ground to a stop buried to the top of the windshield, with an orange student driver sign sticking out the top. The kid was shaking and gripping the wheel with white knuckles when the teacher says, as calmly as can be, "You ought to look forward once in a while when you go down the ramp." Damn. That instructor was committed to proving his point. One well-placed mistake does more to correct an issue than hours of lecturing. Nearly had my left foot peg taken off by a red Porsche 911, which was weaving through traffic at high speed on the highway during my final motorcycle license exam. I figured I insta-failed because I was changing lanes into him, and an unsafe lane change is grounds for failure. I did shoulder check before changing lanes, but the dude was going so fast he wasn't in my line of sight yet. I passed. Not a nearly failed, but I passed my riding test at 18 or 19. I forget, and when riding the instructor's bike back to her lockup on country roads, I went round a blind corner, met a combine harvester crossing the road on the other side. Blades up. Couldn't brake in time. Just went between the front and the edge of the road. Nearly turned myself into shredded cabbage at 19. Just hear the instructor via headset as she stopped in time. Taller bike. Think she saw it over the hedgerows. Are you okay? Cue me pulling into the lockup 2 minutes later. Sitting on the floor and not being able to stand up for the next 20 minutes. And that's why my friends called me boring for never racing my GSX R600 around country lanes with them. Beat that. I wanted to live. I rode 10 years before swapping to a car and never had an accident. Student ran over a gray squirrel. Stopped the car, got out and got it. Brought it back to the car and asked if she could bring it to a veterinary's office. My first behind the wheel. My instructor tried to tell me that if I were faced with a squirrel in the road and in a lot of traffic, I should run over the squirrel to avoid an accident. I told him that I hated that idea. So he told me I could instead keep good distance from the cars behind me to try to give myself time to brake for squirrels. I have a rule about squirrels in the road. Don't swerve to miss them. They are just as likely to dart the other direction and get run over anyway. I haven't hit a squirrel in over 20 years that way. I used to live in Paris as a teenager. People there drive wildly. I was taking the final exam. I was super focused on not making mistakes when some crazy driver just purposely missed a stop sign and rushed in front of me. The examiner had to do an emergency brake, which usually is a major mistake. I thought that's it. I'm peeped. And then he opened the window, flipped at the other car while yelling some rich words at him. Then calmly told me Parisian are assholes. Continue please. And I passed. Same experience here, but during student driving practice. I was getting ready to get in a right turn lane that didn't exist for another 20 feet or so, and some lady came flying around me or tried to in the bike/parking lane. I didn't see her do it, but the instructor slammed on the brakes, then rolled down the window and screamed at this woman for getting over too early. I remember she just looked like a deer in headlights. She was caught. Then he was back to his normal, calm self and we drove on. This never happened to me while I was doing driver's ed, but my teacher said some people will do that. So always check your blind spots and be aware that some people are peeping idiots. My driver instructor once clearly hungover, but on a Pink Floyd CD, and had me drive around country roads for 50 minutes while he had a nap. I've got a similar sort of one, but on my actual test, she entered the car completely stinking of weed, and I swear she wasn't even paying attention to my driving. Every time I looked over she was peeping about with her pen or the air conditioning. She still failed me lol. What the hell did she fail you over? I'm not an instructor, but occasionally babysit new drivers' trucks and buses. In the UK, part of the larger vehicle tests are conducted in a yard before leaving to do the on-road part of the examination. These parts are observed by the examiner from outside the vehicle and include a reversing exercise and an emergency stop. In short, bus test candidate knocked over the examiner during the emergency stop, sending him and his clipboard flying a few meters onto tarmac. Luckily he was not seriously hurt, but everybody from then on used to make an exaggerated stand the hell back motion whenever this part of the test happened. Part of the UK motorcycle test used to be sending you around the block. Then the tester would crouch down hiding behind a parked vehicle. As you rode around the block, they would leap out at the last minute to simulate a surprise pedestrian to test your braking reflexes. If you scared the tester by almost hitting them, you failed. My uncle knew about this part of the test, so he rode around the block slowly and extra carefully. So slowly when he reached the starting point he found his tester lying on the road clutching his testicles after jumping out in front of the wrong motorcyclist, who obviously had not expected this, so they didn't brake in time and parked their bike between the tester's legs. The tester had his testers tested instead of testing the testee. Unfortunate. I know a guy who used to give the final exams for people contesting suspensions of their driver's license with the DMV. He had horror stories to tell me about how bad drivers were. He had multiple stories about students not even making it out of the parking lot before failing and losing their licenses permanently. But the best was when a woman was backing out of the parking space too quickly and hit a car behind her. He turns to the driver and tells her to park back in the space. She guns it and hits the DMV building itself. She then turns to him and asks, "Did I pass?" He said it was the shortest test of his career. So, did she pass? If I remember the story correctly, as I was told this story well over a decade ago, he just stared at her for a moment and asked, "What do you think?" He checked the bad news box on the form and showed her. I used to work as a receptionist at a driving school and got to see the before and after for students and their parents. So many stories, but the two that come to mind that always flabbergasted me were: 1. A mom telling her daughter to always go 10 miles under the speed limit, no matter what, right before her driving test. So if the speed limit is 25, she should go 15 and so on. I had to explain that, unless conditions required her to go slower than speed limit, weather, traffic, etc., she becomes more of a hazard if she is going under speed limit all the time. I'm all for driving safe, but there are better ways to go about it. 2. The girl who got in an accident on her driving test that she caused. I believe she ran a red that had been red for a while and hit a car that had right of way in front of a cop. She didn't understand why she failed and tried to argue about it and schedule an appointment for the same day to retake. I know this slower safer mentality too well. I grew up with my mom merging on the autobahn while barely accelerating. My driving teacher asked me what the peep I was doing and told me I should stay in third, floor it and shift close to red line to be at least at the same speed as the trucks. And the speed recommendation of 130 means you should do approximately 130, not 80 to 90, because being constantly overtaken by trucks is way more dangerous. I was a student. During one of my 3-hour lessons, where we usually would take the highways out to the city, the instructor told me to pull into a bank parking lot. He goes inside and leaves me there for 45 to 50 minutes. He finally comes back and says, "Sorry, I lost my debit card last week and needed a new one." Then tells me that we'll have to extend my lesson by an hour to make up for it. I told him that wouldn't work as I had a shift at work and extending the lesson would make me late. I get that banks have horribly short hours, but that doesn't mean you screw over the 16-year-old who spent 5 months saving for your damn driving school to get there while they're open. That hour I lost never did get made up on another day. Also, the dude had no clue how to teach parallel parking, and I almost failed that portion of my driving test following the way he showed me. I had my instructor, who was also my gym teacher, make me drive him to McDonald's and go through the drive-thru. To get breakfast he got me a McMuffin and hash brown. Drove around a bit, then stopped by his house so he could take a speep. Learned then his daughter was hot. After he got back to the car he told us 3 of us in the car at the time with him that we are not to tell anyone about his daughter. And we all pass. Damn, I miss that guy. But did he buy you breakfast?